All right, let's get started. Again, thank you all for being here. This is Aparo's Nonprofit Bites and Insights. These are our free webinar series where we have topics that are specifically tailored for nonprofits. Today, we are going to talk about space. So programming first, how nonprofits can make smarter space decisions. We have Lauren Davis with us who will be leading our conversation. But before I turn it over to her, a few housekeeping items. So we are recording this session. All of you who are attending live will receive a follow-up email from me. It'll include the direct link to the recording, so you don't have to search for it, and you're more than welcome to share with your colleagues. Slide decks and other resources that I might talk about today will also be shared in that follow-up email. In a moment, I will be going through the attendee list just to make sure we don't have any AI tools. Per Apara policy, we don't allow AI tools into our webinars. But again, it will be recorded, so you will have access to that at the end of the webinar. Q&A and chat box are available for you to use, so please drop in those questions at any time throughout our conversation today. Really quickly, for those of you who are new to Aparo, we are a nonprofit ourselves. We are based in Charlotte, North Carolina, and our mission is to transform communities by connecting nonprofits to technology and business process expertise and resources to amplify your impact. So in other words, we are a capacity building nonprofit focusing on technology, on how to leverage technologies in your organization so that you can have more capacity to focus on your missions. We do offer a wide range of services. So if you are interested, please visit us on our website and you can learn more there. I do really want to take 30 seconds to quickly share some free upcoming opportunities. Tomorrow, I will be leading an info session around our data cohort that is coming up. This is a free 10-week, 1 hour a week cohort where you get to boost your data skills, boost your data strategies. So if that's of interest, please the QR code is on there to register. No pressure at all to sign up. This is just an info session to learn a little bit more. The other free opportunity that we are pushing out because we have a couple of volunteer opportunity of volunteers who are interested in doing this is our website user experience evaluations. So if you're interested in kind of looking at having someone look at your websites and find ways to improve, this is a great opportunity to do so. And that is it for me. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing and turn it over to Lauren.
Thank you so much, Yen Ting. Hi, everybody, and welcome. Thank you so much for joining today. Today, we're going to be talking about real estate. More specifically, we're going to be talking about making smarter space decisions. But before I dive into that, I'd love to introduce myself and share a little bit. Oh, excuse me, I should share my screen, shouldn't I? Share a little bit more about what Denham Wolf does. Oh, here we go. Great. Programming first, how nonprofits can make smarter space decisions. My name is Lauren Davis, and I am the Director of Occupier Services at Denham Wolf. I joined Denham Wolf in 2014, and I was thrilled that I was able to find a place where I could combine my real estate experience with a previous background in the performing arts and special education. Excuse me. Denham Wolf is a full-service real estate firm that specializes in the nonprofit community. We've got 3 service lines. The first being our transaction services. That's the team that I sit on. And we are a team that helps organizations buy, sell, and lease real estate. Our second team is our project management team. And excuse me, I'm losing my voice. It's these North Carolina allergies. Our project management team assists organizations by acting as an owner's rep, and they oversee the design and construction of projects. And then we've got our development services team. So this particular team provides guidance and support for organizations that are looking to either develop or redevelop an asset. Now, across all of the work that we do a tremendous amount of consulting work. whether an organization is facing any sort of real estate question, we will develop a framework to help them explore their options, find clarity to support consensus building, and to help chart a path forward. So on the right-hand side of your screen, you're going to see a sample of organizations that we've worked with. We really work with all types of organizations within the nonprofit community, the arts, healthcare, education, you name it, we're happy to work with them. So also on my screen, you'll see I've got Paul Wolf and Liza Kruth. They're colleagues of mine at Denham Wolf. Paul may jump in and if he's got something to offer, but largely it'll be me today. So, are you going to wave, Paul? Thanks. So, we're going to be discussing smarter real estate decisions or smarter space decisions by using a readiness checklist that we've prepared. And we've broken that down into 3 segments. That's space, time and money, and people. And sometimes we'll refer to this as the physical, the fiscal, and the organizational. And then if we've got time at the end, we love to talk about things our clients have done. So I'll share a couple of case studies that sort of illustrate where things went well with smart space decisions and where folks wish they had done things differently. So here is our checklist. And I think this is going to be linked at the back of this PDF, at the back of this presentation. So this is something that you'll be able to walk home with. I will refrain from reading each one of these to you because we're going to go through it throughout this next hour. Well, we're going to start at the top with space. So the first thing you're going to want to do is understand what types of physical space are needed to accommodate your program. Once you've gathered that information, you're going to translate your program into feet and inches. And then you're going to determine if your space type is commodity or specialized. And I'm going to dig a little deeper into that in a second. So in understanding your physical space needs, there's one question you need to ask yourself first. That's going to put you on the right path. And that's whether or not your needs are straightforward or not. If your needs are straightforward, you may not be looking to, for example, you may not be looking to make a significant change in your workplace strategy, or you're not looking to dramatically change the size of the space that you're utilizing. If that's the case, your executive team will likely be able to make some decisions around the types of space that you need with support from your program directors, potentially staff surveys, or utilizing a commercial real estate broker. In the event that your program is not straightforward, and this is an example of perhaps you are looking to make significant changes, or you're developing a new theater or a new community healthcare facility, you might want to consider bringing in a specialized architect or consultant. So examples of this are workplace design consultant, theater designers, or patient flow experts. I want to go back to that last thought for a second. So we're working with an organization now, and they are a hub organization that brings folks from around the country to their space. And they do know that they need new space. They can't stay where they are now. And their current space is not particularly efficient. It's not a traditional office space. It's very old and doesn't quite suit the needs of the organization. However, there are some pieces, some elements to that space, especially that are related to it being a non-traditional office space, that really resonate with them as an organization. So they would be considered sort of not straightforward. And as a result, they've elected to bring on a workplace design consultant, and specifically one that has a strong architectural background, to help them better understand how they could be efficient with their space, support their program, but also incorporate some of those unique elements that they love moving forward. Awesome. Okay. So now that you know whether you're straightforward or not, you're going to want to take inventory of your activities. So take a full survey of everything that happens within your space and what you need in order to do it successfully. So some examples of questions you might ask. Do all of your team members need the exact same type of space? It's highly likely that you may have members of your team that require a very kind of quiet, private space. And then other teams need to be very collaborative and they tend to be a little noisier. I can say in our own office, our transactions team is always the rowdier side of the office than our project management team. You can also ask yourself if everybody needs the same physical space. So some teams may need larger desks or more storage. And then if you're an office intensive user, ask yourself, does everybody actually need their own office? Or is there an opportunity to create shared offices or even team rooms? Other things you might want to consider is your level of meetings. Are you a convener? Do you have a frequent large meetings and events that you need to control that space? Or is that space that you can outsource? And then additionally, are you public facing? Is the community coming to your space? Are you serving the community within your space? Or are you looking for ways to use your space to build community? The next thing I wanted to, before I move on to headcount, also think about your physical requirements. And this is incredibly important if you are a non-standard, you're not an office user. It's a heavy program use. So for a lot of our performing arts organizations, they're frequently coming to us asking for large column-free spaces with very high ceilings. And our community healthcare organizations are coming to us looking for spaces with many small rooms and the capacity for a higher plumbing and electrical output. Great. So that takes us to headcount. Understand who's in your space at any given point during the day. Is there a flow? Does it change given the day, the week, or the month? And then also, does each room need to be dedicated to its use? Are there opportunities to kind of double up spaces, create multi-purpose rooms? Know what your traffic flow is throughout the day. Are people coming and going at all times? Is there a period of time where everybody's coming at once and then leaving at once? If you don't know that going in, you may be chasing a space that's not going to, a landlord, if you're leasing, that's not going to approve your use. It may be higher traffic than their building can support. So when I think about space efficiencies, I'm reminded of a client we worked with a few years ago. This was actually pre-COVID. And this is an organization that takes arts and crafts and games to children in hospitals. And they didn't have a huge budget for their office space. Their staff was largely in the field all week. They did need a place to touch down to do some paperwork and get supplies. There was one day during the week where everybody was in the office for a couple of hours, and they did need a tremendous amount of storage. They had an absolutely insane amount of glitter that they needed to store for their staff. So in talking them through their space program, what we realized was that they needed to prioritize one big room that just had the capacity for a ton of wall space for storage. And then instead of building a large conference room that they would use periodically, they used furniture solutions. So they had flexible desks and tables that they could move around when everybody was in the room. They could join them together, sit around. But then when people were popping in and out, they could break them apart and be much more flexible. So once you've gathered your inventory of space requirements, your activities, and you've given a head count, you're going to put it into what we call our space program. And what you see on your screen here is, and I'll zoom in on this in a second, this is an example of a space program that we put together for an organization. On the left-hand column, you'll see 4 categories. So for this particular client, they needed reception space, general office and workstations, shared and program spaces, and support space. Within each category, we then break that down even further. So with this client, they didn't need one type of reception space, they needed multiple. With their workstations, they are the type of organization that had different size workstations for different tasks. And then we think about all the shared and program spaces and the support space. Support space is where people tend to forget some of the things that they need. So I'll call out a couple that I like to remind folks about. If you are paper heavy and you still have a lot of filing cabinets, count them and make sure you add these into the program. That square footage can add up very quickly. Generally speaking, folks undercount the amount of storage that they require. Many groups are going cloud-based, so they no longer need a server closet. And then bathrooms are a big one. Do you need dedicated bathrooms, or would something in the hall be sufficient? So once we have all of our line items, and I will say this should be highly tailored to your requirement. If this is reflective of, you can see vocational training. So this is largely office with some community coming in for training sessions. This would look very different if you're a school or healthcare organization, performing arts, or standard office. So be very specific in what you're adding into this. Because then we're going to add, once we have what you need, we're going to put sizes to it. In addition to sizes, we're going to put the quantity. So I'm going to move, would be your lovely faces, so I can see. So in this scenario, this organization, because they do have folks coming into their space, the public coming into their space for training, they were very heavy on the reception. So they need 2 small reception areas as well as one very large reception area. So we broke that out. So we're showing that they need 200 square feet. That's the 2 small reception areas, as well as 1 large at 400. So for a total of 600 square feet of reception space. I should note that this is the document that if you identified space and you were moving forward and you were going to build this out, this is the document that you would give to your architect. And this would tell them what to design so they can tell folks what to build. So that's why it's important to be really thoughtful about every space you want to put into this, and then thoughtful about the sizes. Now, once we input all of our data, we're then going to start to add a couple of numbers, and I'm going to go into those in a second, but these are some add-ons. So in this particular scenario, the program square footage, or the net square footage, was a little over 10,000 square feet. We add some additional pieces on. That gets us to our rentable square footage of almost 15,000 square feet. So our square footage grows. And I'll go into how that is. Before I do that, though, I'll take a little bit of a step back. A little primer in case folks aren't familiar with any of these terms. So net square footage in this instance is our program square footage. And this is the square footage that if you could just work within a room, that's all you would need. Our usable square footage includes circulation. So that's your hallways, your space around workstations, your interior walls. So that's the walls dividing your offices, and then the columns holding up the ceiling. So we add our circulation to our program square footage. That gets us to usable. And then we add what's called a core factor in North Carolina. And this is your proportionate share of common areas within the building. So that's your building lobbies, that's shared restrooms, that's shared hallways if you're on a multi-tenanted floor. In a suburban office building, that's probably going to be about 10 to 15%. If you are in a multi-tenanted building, or you're in a building that's got a large number of amenities, maybe it's got an office gym and a shared a shared conference room. That can be higher. That can be more in the 12 to 18% range. And then we've got 2 they're highlighted here because they're not as applicable to the space program that we're discussing at the moment, but that is your buildable square footage and your zoning square footage. So buildable square footage is the amount of space that can actually be constructed for a realistic project. So you'll need to consider things like setbacks and whatnot to what's actually possible. And then the zoning square footage is the legal maximum on paper. So those are more relevant if you are building a space or developing a space. So another way to look at this, program square footage plus circulation walls and columns gets us to our usable square footage number. Our usable square footage plus our core factor gets us to our rentable square footage number. And our rentable square footage is what we go shopping for. And then not to belabor the point, but just because this sometimes trips people up, again, easy numbers on this one. We're just doing loose math. We've got our program square footage of 10,000 square feet. We add our circulation of 25%, our core factor of 10%. If you were to come to me and say, our program requires 10,000 square feet to be successful, I would take you shopping for about 13,500 square feet, give or take. So the last thing we'll talk about in terms of space is whether or not your space is a commodity product or a specialized product. So commodity spaces are things like standard office buildings, retail, commercial condos. This is the type of space there tends to be a lot of it available depending on your market. And if this is the type of space you're looking for all intents and purposes, you could function in any example of this space. On the other hand, specialized spaces are spaces that generally have specific physical characteristics to suit the intended use. So education space, we all know what a school looks like, performing arts space, maybe it's an existing fit out theater, religious, medical. The reason it's important to understand which type of space you're looking for is because it will have a direct impact on the next thing we're going to talk about, and that's time and money. If you're looking for a specialized space, just due to the nature of there being fewer opportunities, fewer products in the market, you will want to allow for more time for your search process than if you were looking for standard office space. Additionally, these spaces tend to have a higher build-out cost, especially if you are needing to create the space from scratch. If you're taking a raw space and you're turning it into a performing arts space, that's likely to be more expensive than if you are building out a standard office. So I don't think I've seen any comments any questions yet. I'm going to move on to time and space, but I'll give everybody just a second if there's anything that I've said that doesn't make sense.
Lauren, there was a question in the Q&A,
Yeah.
but aren't the circulation walls columns unusable because there's a column in the way?
That's a great question. So while it is not functional, usable space, it is included within the calculation of the usable. It's just as the wall partition between two offices isn't technically usable square footage, but it is space that needs to be there in order for the space to be usable. Great. Okay. So let's start to talk about time and money. For today's conversation, we are going to largely focus on this first line at the top, but we will touch on the others as well. So the first one, create a timetable for the project through to turnkey. I'm going to head. So this is an example of an ideal timeline. When we start a project, we will prepare an estimated timeline so that we have a clear understanding of the vital decision points that help ensure a timely project. On, on your screen is a schedule. Again, I noted this is sort of our ideal timeline. This shows a 63-week timeline, and it is one that would be relevant for an organization that is looking to build out their space, not just paint and carpet, but this would reflect a sort of a full, maybe not a full build, yeah, a decent build out for a new office space. The top line, again, sorry, let me move faces. So our first phase is planning. In this particular scenario, we've allocated 6 weeks for planning. In this time, you're going to assemble your team. You're going to review your current real estate obligation, which I know sounds a little silly, right? Because you're looking forward, not backwards. But by understanding your current real estate obligation, you're setting a really important contextual reference point for your team when you go to start making decisions. And then this is also when you're going to work through your space program and your search parameters and your budget. And when you're setting your search parameters, consider things like location, whether or not you need access to public transportation and specific forms of public transportation. Do you need to be on a ground floor versus a high floor? Do you have specific security requirements, specific column widths or ceiling heights? Put all of that into your search parameters. Have your team sign off on them at the start. And we'll talk a little bit about consensus building at the end, but this is a great moment for consensus building. This particular 6-week plan is representative of an organization that is not looking to make major changes. If you were to want to bring on a workplace design consultant, you would obviously want this to be a much longer process. Similarly, if you want a lot of buy-in from your staff and you want to take the time to do a thoughtful staff survey, this is where you'd want to do it, and you would want to allocate more time for that. Now, the market search. This is the fun part for a lot of people. This is where you're going shopping. In this scenario, we've allocated a three-month search process, and that is a really healthy search timeframe for a standard office. This is where it's important to understand whether or not you're looking for a commodity product or a specialized product. If you were looking for a specialized product, depending on what specifically you're looking for and what the market tends to offer, this search period could be as long as 6-9 months or more. We have had projects where we have looked for the perfect space for a year plus. This is where you'd really want to rely on your real estate broker to help you understand what your time frame is going to be like and what the market will bear, what's available to you in the market. How long is this going to take you to help find this? This is also one of the points where you tend to have the most control over it as an organization, because your only counterparty is the market. You're not waiting, unless you're looking for a specialized product, you're not waiting for the market to come back to you with availability. So I'm going to group phases 3 and 4 together. And in this scenario, they're both lasting about 8 weeks. So a total of 6 weeks for negotiation. I don't know if anybody here has worked on a commercial real estate project before, but there are 2 points of negotiation in a commercial real estate project. You have your term sheet negotiations, and that's where you're outlining your initial business terms. Often you are negotiating multiple term sheets at once. We often recommend that our clients pursue a few properties at once at this stage, for a couple of reasons. It helps you not fall madly in love with one particular property. It helps drive a little bit of competition. And it also gives you the opportunity, should one of the properties fall apart for any reason, you're not going back to the beginning of the search process. So you're still maintaining a linear timeline, because it can be very disruptive, and people can lose a lot of steam if you have to go back to the search process to start all over again to identify a new site. Once you have agreed business terms and you've selected your site, then you're going to move on to either your lease negotiation or your contract negotiation, depending on whether you are leasing space or looking to purchase space. And then design and construction. So if you've ever undertaken a construction project, you know, keeping things on schedule and under budget or on budget can be a challenge. So this is a point where you really don't want to shortchange yourself. Make sure you're really giving yourself room for contingencies. So you may not have 12 to 18 months for a project. As I said, this is an ideal timeline. If you have less time, there are absolutely ways you can be thoughtful about your schedule and condense it. So if you've got a more immediate requirement, some things that we can do to expedite the process. In this timeline, and this is a timeline that is very close to one that I did for an organization, and they were very successful, but we stuck very strictly to our timeline. We hit the ground running. There was not a lot of opportunity for planning. So in this scenario, this works best for an organization that has consensus from the start. They know what they're looking for. It's a commodity product, and they can really kind of jump from go. We can get out and start searching. With phase 2, you can see we've condensed that market search period from 5 weeks, or excuse me, from 12 weeks for searching to 4. It is absolutely possible if you are looking for an office space to find an office space in a shorter period of time than the 12 weeks that I had initially outlined. What it's going to mean, though, is you're going to need to be receptive to the inventory that's in the market. You may not have the opportunity to see 20 different properties. You may have to say, we're going to go out on Friday. We're going to see the 5 properties that we know work for us. We're going to choose from that. Maybe we'll bring some board members by to get their buy-in. But you're really choosing from what's available to you at that time. Where it can be a little harder on a condensed timeline to tighten things up is the term sheet negotiation and the contract negotiation. And that's for 2 reasons. One, with the term sheet negotiation and the contract negotiation, you have a counterparty. So you cannot control how quickly they are going to respond to you. You can only control how quickly you can respond to them. So if you are looking at a condensed timeline, it's very important from the start to have your entire team bought in to the schedule and know that when paper lands on our desk, we have to respond to it and get it off our desk. This is also going to mean that you may not have the opportunity to really finesse a negotiation as much as you would like. What's important here is to know which levers in negotiation are most important to you from the start. And the levers that we reference are your free rent, your tenant improvement allowance, and your base rent. Start with your best foot forward. Put your best offer forward and work from there. And then again, if you are trying to take a 60-week schedule to a 20-week schedule, you're likely going to take a space as is. Maybe you'll do I have an organization now that has a tight timeline. They're taking the space as is. They're going to do a little bit of work on their own once they move in to make it a better home for them. But they recognized if they waited for the landlord to do the work, it would be very hard for them to get in the time that they needed to get in. So largely you're taking the space as is. So regardless of your timetable though, there's always a solution. By laying out your schedule up front, you're going to be able to identify potential pitfalls as well as opportunities. It gives you the opportunity to determine vital decision-making points, and it provides a guide to keep all parties on track. Okay, so the next line item is estimating your budget. So this is going to include your rent cost, your purchase cost, your capital expenses, and your operating expenses. When we work with organizations, especially when we're doing a lease, we will prepare a financial model that will give a very full picture of the total financial implication of the lease. We do this because we understand that occupancy expense is the second most expensive line item on a nonprofit's budget. So it's important that you go in with as much information as possible. When we run out these financial models, we consider all of the operating expenses. Generally, they're estimated. We can only make best guess, but we include our furniture, our fixtures, and our equipment, any potential build-out cost, real estate costs, escalations in the rent, bumps in the rent. We layer everything into this because we do want to be as detailed as possible. It's just vital that we give an organization the opportunity to see the whole picture, especially when you're considering multiple spaces. And then sense check your budget against benchmarks. This is an opportunity to talk to friendly organizations. Talk to them about their projects, what they're paying, what they're seeing, but also bring in a real estate professional or a project manager or construction manager, and they'll provide you feedback on the market. Next, we have assessing financial capacity. So this is especially important within the context of a purchase. You are probably going to want to speak to a nonprofit-focused financial consultant to understand your available funding sources. I think it's really important if you're planning for a capital project to bring on a fundraising consultant as early as possible to really help establish your fundraising capacity. We had an organization that was weighing their options, whether they wanted to sell a property and buy something else or renovate what they had. And everybody had an opinion and everybody had a different opinion. Until they brought in a fundraising consultant, they didn't have the right information to make the decision. Ultimately, the fundraising consultant did the work, got them the information to share with them how much they honestly thought that they'd be able to fundraise. And that showed that they would be falling short should they choose to renovate their building. They just weren't going to be able to fundraise enough money to do that. That gave them a definitive point that pushed them towards the realization that the best option for them as an organization would be to sell their property and purchase something that needed less work than the building that they had currently. Another person who's great to talk to, depending on your project, is a business consultant. If you are looking to grow your program and ultimately grow the space that's required to support that larger program, talk to a business consultant to really underscore your capacity for a larger project. And then the last one on time and money, structure funding to be appealing to your counterparties. So again, this is really important in the context of purchasing. It's possible that in the case of a purchase, your funding may not come at a time when it's time to pay a deposit or close on a property. Maybe it's possible that you haven't finished your capital campaign, or the grants that you're waiting on haven't been funded yet. You will be, when you're in the market, you are competing with traditional buyers. And so you need to, in some way, make your offer compelling. If you are not able to match the market timing, you have to find some other way to win over the seller. Yanting, did I have any questions on that? I can't see our...
Nope, not yet. You're
Okay.
good.
Awesome. Okay, so we're going to move on to our last category, people. So in some ways, I think this is I think this might be the most important. It is so important to understand at the start of the project who your decision makers are. Nonprofits have so many voices, all supporting a singular mission. You've got your board, you've got your leadership, your executive leadership, and you have your staff. Everybody's going to have an opinion about what you're doing. You need to determine at the start of a project how the decisions will be made. If this is left nebulous, you can often spend time and energy and even money chasing a project that's just going to hit a roadblock, an obstacle that you can't overcome. By surrounding yourself with trusted advisors, maybe a good broker, a real estate attorney, an architect, they will provide invaluable resources to help you build consensus and fulfill your vision. I can't underscore enough, if you do that work at the start of a project, you will be far more successful, and you will be able to uh, sort of project where your pitfalls might be and navigate those before you hit them. So, oh, okay, we've got plenty of time for case studies. Great. Okay. So I'm sorry I don't have pretty pictures for this. I don't like calling out my clients because I love them all so dearly. But this is an example of an organization. This was a community healthcare provider that was looking to relocate their headquarters, and they had a lesson learned that I think they would do differently the next time. So, in addition to relocating their headquarters, they wanted to shrink their footprint by at least 50%. That did not mean, though, that they were shrinking their staff by 50%. So they had to find a way to accommodate their entire staff with 50% of the office space. They also wanted to save money. That was part of the reason why they were trying to decrease their square footage by so much. Because they wanted to save money, that was their primary focus. They decided not to hire a workplace design consultant and instead have those conversations internally with executive leadership. When we were out touring spaces, it became clear pretty quickly that there was a division within the executive leadership, that some folks felt very strongly that they should be approaching this project one way, and there was a cohort that felt it should be the absolute opposite way. So after a few months, they realized they needed to put a pin in the search. They had to go back to the drawing board. They needed to re-engage in these conversations internally so that they could move forward with a space. What this meant was that it pushed out their timeline, making it a little bit, getting us very close to their existing lease obligation or expiration, making everybody a little bit nervous that there would potentially be a world in which we needed to find short-term interim space for them, which we really wanted to avoid doing. But it also created a lot of tension and frustration among the leadership staff. And they also lost a couple of opportunities that they had been a little bit excited about. So ultimately, we were successful. We found them a beautiful space. They're working out of it in a wonderful way now. But I think if you chatted with them today and they reflected on sort of the start of the project, I think that they would agree they would have been better suited to spend a few $1,000s to bring on a workplace design consultant to really hash out to build consensus at the start of that project, than sort of letting it go and trying to do it internally. And then a really nice one to end on for today's conversation. So this was a foundation that we worked with. This foundation really focuses on combating poverty. And they were leasing space in a very high-end building. It was very high-end space itself. And they realized they needed to be a little bit smarter with their resources and with their space. So they decided they brought all of the board together, all of the executive leadership together, and they really examined their values and their priorities and how that should be reflected in their space. What they decided to do after having those conversations was that they needed to lease space in a far less fancy building, in a far less fancy neighborhood, but design the space in a way that was incredibly welcoming and inspirational for their grantees. So for them, making the smart real estate decision was to kind of move outside of their comfort zone and create a space not just for them, but for their grantees. So that is the end of what I have to share with you today. On the screen, we've got a couple of things that I think Yin Ting will be able to share this presentation with you, and you'll be able to access these three. This is our readiness checklist that I've discussed throughout our whole conversation. We also have a key terminology booklet that we find is helpful for organizations, and then our space program toolkit that will be linked for you as well. If you have any questions, I think we've got some time for questions. My email address is also on the screen here. If you have a question that you do not want to ask in a public setting, it's totally fine. Please feel free to reach out. We are always happy to be a resource for the nonprofit community. That's it.
Thank you so much, Laura, and a lot of fantastic information. And I'm excited to share these resources that you are generously sharing. I will be sending the follow-up email by end of day tomorrow, so it'll include the recording as well as the resources that Lauren will be sending and the slide deck. I will also include Lauren's contact information in case you do want to touch base with her afterwards. I don't see any questions coming through, so I think that will be it for today. Thank you so much, Lauren, for sharing this expertise with us, and hopefully we'll see you again soon.
Yeah. Thanks, Yin Ting. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Bye,
Thank
everybody.
you, everyone. Have a good one.